Welcome to Selling in Health podcast. And this podcast is where we unpack real stories behind how healthcare innovation gets adopted. And today, I have a special guest who has done it all in his previous lives. He has built and sold startups, he has been on those journeys all the time. So, welcoming here, Siva, a dear friend and a health entrepreneur. Welcome, Siva. How are you today?
Good. Thanks, Aisha. Thanks again. I know we met a few months ago too, in person. Today is yeah, I'm happy and glad that we could find time to talk about some of
Right.
the. It's a great podcast that you're running.
Yes,
Yeah.
Siva, because we all know sales is such a pain, all the time is for most health founders. And you have done fantastically well in some of the works that you've done and stories that you told me. So I really wanted to bring it to our podcast. So before we get into that, Siva, why not we get a bit of background from you, like your own story, especially the startups that you have built, the products you have been part of and what you are doing right now.
Sure. So all along, my career has been in healthcare. Ever since I'm a technologist. I'm an engineer by background, right? A software engineer. But for some reason, all the work that I've been doing has been in the pharma world, or pharma initially in the pharma world, then now healthcare. So I was a consultant to many pharma companies, right? In the launch of major drugs. So I have worked in some of the major uh, drugs that you may be hearing from. Botox was one of them, right? Botox was one of the drugs that when during the launch, I worked in the customer relationship management part of it and marketing and launch plans and everything. Then, of course, other big brands, I can make many of them. Some people would know Viagra, right? So Viagra is a brand that I was part of or worked on. So my life has always been in launching medications until 2010, right? Until 2010. And I started my first company. So before that, I worked for a company where I was a consultant. 2010
Mhm.
is when I started my first venture. That's my first startup. Today would have been an AI company, so we used AI, machine learning, and AI at that time when the machine learning AI was just starting in 2010, right?
Right.
To go into unstructured information of pharmaceutical companies and
Mhm.
find out drug and vaccine side effects, right?
Mhm.
That the companies don't know about. So
Mhm.
it was we didn't use any large language models, anything like that at that time, but we used a lot of machine learning. But we
Right.
built a product which came out of a problem that we encountered in the field. So that's how the product started out. So that did very well. We had some large companies as our customers. You name any pharma company, we had like a customer: Johnson Johnson, Merck, Pfizer, um, and big brands, Reckitt Benckiser. Then my company then got acquired by IQVIA. IQVIA is one of the largest health tech data clinical research organization. About 100,000 employees, is a huge organization. So uh, I was part of the management team after IQVIA acquired like our company, and I got involved at that time even in the IPO process of IQVIA. Right, so IQVIA was a private company at that time, and it was the second largest IPO of that year in the world that we
Okay.
worked on. It's a huge IPO. Um, so then that gave me a lot of experience. Then in 2016, and I became an investor afterwards, right? So I worked at IQ, but also I became a investor. Then one of the companies that I invested in 2016 was very attractive, which is what JOGO Health is right now, right? So JOGO Health, initially I was an investor. So we are a digital therapeutic company, right? So we use basically a concept called neural plasticity to train your own brain and muscles to recover from various indications. So think of stroke recovery, right? Think
Mhm.
of migraines, think of Parkinson's disease, urinary incontinence, chronic constipation. Wherever there's a muscle in the brain, connectivity. So that's basically the company that we built. Sorry, the company was built and presented to me, and I made an investment, and I saw amazing clinical outcome, right? So then in 2020, I again left my corporate job and joined the company as a co-founder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that here we are after 5 years, having touched almost more than 25,000 patients around the world, FDA approved. We have presence in India too, a lot of business in India. Right now, I'm in China doing a JV here with one of the largest companies. So it's going global. It's doing very well. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Great. Thank you for that context, Siva. And let's keep discussing more on the, especially the sales side of it. So, basically now I can see that there are two parts of your story. So one is, the first pharma sales that you did, and you have been like a salesperson on the ground, moving these things right from concept to the market. And then with Jogo, you have your digital therapeutics sales, basically that you are doing currently. So maybe we can start with like what kind of contrasting approaches that you saw if you are, let's say, building pharma, then what is the kind of sales approaches? And then if you're building digital therapeutics, what kind of sales approaches?
Sure. So I would segment them into four, Ayush, right? One is the patient, right?
Hmm.
If you're selling something directly to patient, right?
Hmm.
Then the provider, in this case, it could be the doctor or the hospital, right? Health systems, right? Then you have the payer, which is insurance companies, right? Then you have the pharma, right? They call them the four Ps, right? So selling to different, each one of them is totally a different approach, strategy, and everything, right? I'll start with my first company, which is always we sold to pharma, right? So
Hmm.
pharma is the buyer. Pharma is the
Hmm.
buyer. So it's a B2B
Hmm.
sales always, right? So pharma is the buyer. And pharma, interesting thing, I mean, I'm talking about branded large pharmaceutical companies. Like this is talking about Pfizer,
Hmm.
and the likes, right? The deal sizes are so big, right? Deal sizes are
Right.
so big. Sales cycle is long, but deal sizes are so big.
Right.
And you will always know that they will have a budget,
Hmm.
right? So when before you sell, you have to find out the guy is wasting your time or does he really have budget, right? It's very fundamental sales
Authentic.
question you ask. Otherwise, you become a vanity project and you become their pet, right?
Right.
So pharma is always an easy thing that you just check and they will have budgets. And the budgets are large, right? And so your sales cycle is longer. Um, that's an easy, I would not say easy, but you would, if you sell it, then your business is going to be very, very good. And there's always a need, then find out the need too. There's so many different needs in pharma, right? In my case, you would have not even heard about that the pharma company wanted to find out their own side effects, right? By the way, our product currently is plugged into both the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, right? So
Okay.
every
Okay.
single vaccine that's been planted, we find out the side effects, right? uh, Side effects that are in the unstructured with data, put it this way, right? So that's one. Then you take patients. It's simple. In a patient direct to patient sale, you have talking about two things. One is the patient is going to pay out of pocket, right? In our case, Jogo, we also have a direct to patient business, right? Although it's a digital therapeutics. In India, it's a cash business where patients pay cash, whereas
Mhm.
in the US, it's an insurance business where we had to build insurance, right?
Where's
In
the
that
money
case,
gone?
yeah,
Yeah.
and direct to patient sales also is what pharma normally does, but it's a prescription, right? So patients are not making their own decision. You're actually not selling to patients, you're selling to doctors.
Hmm.
Doctors are writing a prescription and then the patient buys it from us, right? So that's a different sales cycle.
Hmm.
um, so you can see that, right? Although it's a direct to patient, we are a prescription digital therapeutic. It's not like patients can simply download our app or buy it off of the internet and use it. Yeah, we are clinically validated, so they have to get a prescription from the doctor. That's a different sales. So in the here you're acting like a pharma sales company model, right?
Hmm.
Where you're influencing doctors. Then comes the provider sales, right? So pharma, I talked about pharma, patient, now provider. This is health systems, right? Health system, we are also selling to health systems. Health systems sales is totally, I think you have a lot of questions. We should probably go deeper into that. Um,
Hmm.
and there are different personas within health systems, right? Who are you selling to, really, right? Within health systems, so that changes your sales pitch. How do you approach it? Because if you're selling to a CTO, then you are maybe building something like internet security type of stuff, right? Doctors
Right.
don't care about it, right? There are no, okay, they want, okay, this is secure. They don't even know about it. But anything that touches the doctor, right? Or the provider, then the sales process changes a lot in the health system sales.
Mhm.
Payer sales is a totally different one. Payers buy from IT companies very much like pharma, right? They're huge budget, large companies, right? And you're not selling some interesting point solutions. Is normally it's a long sales cycle, but it's a B2B sales totally, right? The influences are different within the pharma and the payer, right? Side, right? Whereas in the health systems and patient, there are intricacies and dynamics, right? So you approach it differently. Let's pause there. I know I don't want to get deeper into. I know you have more questions, right? But those are some the four
Yeah.
P's you look at it, right? Patient, payer, provider, and pharma.
Right.
You have to
Right.
see the dynamics are
Each would have
different.
a different flavor. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah, but I think let's continue on that thread. So basically, let's talk about, these different roles, especially from the health system side. Like within a health system, how do we, like, if you can walk through some sort of steps you would take if, let's say, you are taking your solution to a health system, then, what would
Yeah.
be your approach?
Yeah. There are two kinds of systems that you will normally sell to health system, right? One is a clinician facing solution, right? At least there is one thing that touches a clinician. Workflow could be, or it's actually end user could be the clinician, right?
Mhm.
Something is happening with the clinician. Then you are selling purely IT solutions where the clinician had no say in it. I just gave an example of putting a cybersecurity thing in place, right? Clinicians, it of course it touches the clinicians workflow a little bit, but they don't normally get in the way of, hey, I want that versus this, right? Um, but for example, even in that case, if you have the clinicians, type the password in ten different places, they will hate it, right? So the
Right.
workflow comes in there too from a UX and other things, because
Mhm.
cybersecurity, of course, cannot get in the way of day-to-day activities. But so I'll tell you our case, right? I'll tell you our example, some example. Then it'll help you. So we have large health systems use JOG. Mayo Clinic is a customer as well as an investor, and large other health systems also. This you can't get bigger than health Mayo Clinic, right? So this is the process. So how does it work? So when we are selling a clinician facing solution, ours is a clinical solution, right? The first person you need to have a champion is a clinician, right? A clinician needs to um, be your champion, and they need to have a say in it, a buy in it, right? Then comes the other solutions. But just because clinicians wanted it doesn't mean that it's all done, right? Then
Mhm.
it goes through third-party risk assessment from the IT perspective, right? They want to make sure that your software, given all the hospitals that got hacked by many third parties or outside intruders, cybersecurity is a huge thing because we don't have any more non-cloud based solutions in the market anymore, right? So
Mhm.
you have to be passing that piece as well. But the collision starts with the collision, right? And then you have a collision buyer, then you have the IT buy-in. Cybersecurity becomes a huge selling point right there. It's a very, very important thing in the selling process. Then the third piece is the workflow, right? Workflow in healthcare is very, very, very critical, right? Because I don't know how much you know about the billing.
Mhm.
Sometimes the billing is measured in 2 to 3 minutes, right? So if, for example, there are billing codes there's an 8 minute rule, for example, in some billing codes, right, where they only bill
Mhm.
8 minutes of work. So you can see how minor the small time span is. If your solution is going to even add a 30-second additional work, right, to the
Mhm.
clinician or the administrator there, they will hate it. Right? They want the easiest solution. I'm talking about even not only clinician, it could be the receptionist, right, at a department within a hospital. You
Mhm.
give them some additional work, all the day they're stressed, right? You tell them, hey, can you get that fax? Next step is, fax is still there in hospitals, right?
Right.
Can we add that one other step into the process that you need to click that other button?
Right. Right.
It's
Right.
difficult unless this is absolutely, absolutely important, unless it saves them time, right? That's important to understand. It's a very, people forget that piece is huge I mean, I'm talking to large health systems. That's an important piece. So you're talking about clinician buy-in, then the IT buy-in, architecture, all the usual IT talk, right? Security, then the non-clinical admin workflow, right? So these three are important pieces. So
Mhm.
sometimes even the non-clinical admin can drive decisions. They can say, hey, if this is going to make my life easier and I can save like 10 minutes of my time for each 1 hour, doctors will listen to them because doctors rely on them a lot, right? Or physicians rely on, right? So that's
Mhm.
the clinician facing. So it's important in health systems here. Then comes the pure IT sale, right? So pure IT sale also they would involve. So I'll give
Mhm.
you our example, right? So JOGO is used for migraines and is also used for urinary incontinence and other things at Mayo Clinic, right? So
Mhm.
the workflow is a patient comes in, doctor thinks, okay, you have migraine, you have tried many things, and I think JOGO would work for you. And here's a prescription, right, for you for JOGO. And you're going to
Mhm.
go to that room, right, and meet that nurse who's going to walk you through
Mhm.
how a JOGO session will be conducted, right? You see that
Mhm.
I'm introducing personas here, right? So you see that this doctor made a decision now because it's passing on to someone else, right? Right, to a nurse, and between the nurse and the doctor, then there is some admin doing some other work, right, in
Right.
there. So now this goes to this nurse, and nurse says, okay, here's JOGO, this is how you use it, it's a kit. By the way, you call this number, they will send you a kit home, right? See the workflow changes there, and there's
Right.
shipping involved in that, right? So we send a kit to the patient's home. um, and then comes logistical issues, right? So you are now the physician, the admin, the nurse. Now there are other folks involved, right? This whole thing. So in a digital
Yeah.
therapeutic like that. So in our case, we had to talk to all these other. So we map out the whole thing, right? This is what the workflow is going to be, and these are the people that are going to involved, and you have to convince each one of them, right? In that case. Whereas, let's say you're selling I don't know, maybe an example, easiest would be a cybersecurity solution, right? Cybersecurity solution, where you're starting from the CTO down, right? But it's also going to be some involvement in in a physician, or somebody has to change a password or something, right? And then,
Mhm.
but their influence on that will be less than a CTO's influence, right? Whereas if a clinician solution, it's the clinician, the admin, the nurse, and the other ones who are in this will be much higher. The IT CTO come in only to make sure the technology is okay, takes safe, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's the dynamics. I would say anybody trying to sell to health
Mhm.
systems, map out that workflow, right? Because just go
Mhm.
to a hospital website or hospital LinkedIn page and see how many people work there, right? At the hospital, and what are the roles they have, right?
Mhm.
And find out if
Are
any.
roles, quick counter question on this one. Do you think that the roles reflect the right kind of work they are doing, or sometimes these roles can be a mismatch? Just to know, like, what has been your reading
The
typically?
hospitals have very defined roles, right? Very defined roles.
Okay.
Yeah. The roles and responsibilities are well defined in healthcare, not
Okay.
like some other business, right?
Okay.
Where,
Okay.
uh, you know,
Yeah.
I
Like
always bring
few
up a great
industries.
example in
Yeah.
health.
Like in fintech, I've seen like, like there's a joke that everybody's a VP. So it started with a VP and
Everybody's
stuff.
a VP, absolutely. Here, roles are defined, right? I would say
Mhm.
healthcare at a hospital setting and
Mhm.
a movie setting are the only two places where there are
Mhm.
roles and responsibilities. If the movie setting, if the lights is not working, they will turn and look at the guy who's responsible for the light, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Everybody has a role. If you look at a film production, right? There's
Okay.
no question. That's why you have so many things. People's name after the movie, right? This guy did that. This
Right.
guy did it.
Right.
Same
Edits.
with healthcare, right? Same with
Mm-hmm.
healthcare. If something goes wrong, exactly they know who the person is. But in fintech, you're absolutely right. And for
Mm-hmm.
that matter, even in pharma, it's a B2B, it's a business. And there are so many people that we talk to that some guy will be sitting there, we don't know why, right, in a meeting. Right? But in health systems, roles are defined. So you go to a LinkedIn page and find out care coordinator. They will know exactly what that person's role is, right? But my
Mm-hmm.
point is your solution, if whatever you're selling, may touch people that you may not even be thinking about, right? So that's why you need to map that out and And you never know who is going to say yes or no in that process, which can break the deal, right? Um, in whatever you're trying to sell. So that's critical. In our case, we had the doctor, the nurse. We never thought the front desk, the receptionist would be you know, uh, it's not a buyer, but in the middle of the loop, right? Workflow. And if they are not happy, doctor said, and I can't work against this person's, because she has so many things on her plate already, unless it's absolutely necessary. uh, you need to convince that person. They will literally tell you to go talk to that person, right? And convince that person that whatever you're trying to do workflow wise is going to change it. So there are little roles that you need to understand in a health
Mhm.
system, uh, which, and from a selling perspective, Ayush, they could also be your champion sometimes introducing something, right? Because they have more time sometimes with the actual decision makers. So in some cases, for us, sales happen through some front desk person saw Jogo somewhere, right? And because they had a patient with a similar condition, and but there are so many people trying to sell into a physician. I'm talking about pharma companies like meeting with the doctors all the time, and they're like inundated with information, right? So sometimes they hear from other people within the office can make a decision uh, in a health system or a doctor's office. Yeah.
So a lot of information that we covered. I'll piggyback on few of them. One thing you mentioned, which would be very interesting, is you having Mayo Clinic as a customer, and you also mentioned they are an investor as well. So what came first, and if you can take us into that journey, how did you crack the
Yeah.
relationship with Mayo?
Yeah. The use case became first, right? The clinical buying came first. Then they made a decision to invest. Yeah, but just because they made an investment, that doesn't mean that doctors are going to use job, because doctors' decisions are doctors' decision. So we found a way into Mayo Clinic through a physician who
Okay.
saw a product, and he said, "Hey, I have a need here." And very specifically, it was tremors. The hand tremors. People shake their hands. The
Yeah.
Joggo works for that. And I don't know whether you know how much about that particular problem. So 7 million people in the US with essential tremor. I'm not talking Parkinson's tremor. It's essential tremor,
Okay.
where there's no Parkinson's, but they still shake. And currently there are medications that are given to them, and these medications make these people fall. So you're
Mhm.
stopping one problem and you're creating another another problem. These are elderly people, so you give them the medication, and
Mhm.
because of the fogginess they get as a side effect, then they fall. So
Mhm.
Jog is it's a non-invasive solution, and so far there have been no side effects. So he liked it, and he said, "Hey, I want to bring this as a study into Mayo Clinic," and he's one of the top physicians in the space in farm in healthcare. They call them key opinion leaders. These are the top doctors who are doing extraordinary work, new research, right? So someone like
What's
him
the
brings
word
in.
for it?
It's
What's the
called
word?
KOL, key opinion leader. KOL,
You. Okay.
KOL, yeah, key
KOL.
opinion leader.
Okay.
You could Google. There's so much to study. So in
Yeah.
healthcare, there's a business. There's entire companies that operate finding out who the KOLs are.
Okay. Okay. That's a new term. I was
International,
not aware of
yeah,
this.
yeah. It's international KOLs,
Okay.
doctors internationally renowned, right? Because in medical, doctors are very scared to try something new
Right.
unless another doctor is trying, right?
Yes.
So who do they look up to?
Mhm.
Independently, one doctor won't make a decision.
Right.
It's a very, very different. They
Mhm.
just do what tried things,
Mhm.
right? Because they don't want to take risk. So who would take a risk is the guy who's at the top of the chain who wants to, do something new. So first you talk to him, then he will have followers, right? And then the other people will have followers. They call them international KOLs, national KOLs, regional KOLs, and there's a hospital KOL right within that. And
Right.
that's normally how this tree, and there are software companies who build this mapping and sell this as a product and people
Data.
buy, right?
Okay.
So for each one of the therapeutic conditions, again, the point was he was one of the KOLs,
Mhm.
international KOLs. Then we got that, and
Did,
then
did did he find you or you reached out to them? Uh,
no, no, he we found he found us. He found us. at a conference
Okay.
or some paper that you read. I still have got how. Uh, Normally, you publish something, then they look at you and they talk to us. And then we found out that Mayo has a venture fund, right? And we through another mutual friend, we got introduced to the fund. And then they, of course, asked the clinician, "Is this company real? What they making?" And then comes the investment, right? But having said all these things, the selling part when it came to buying, right? That original project was a research project, right? This research project versus selling something commercial, it's a whole
Mhm.
different ball game, right? But these touch points help, right? Hey, okay, that doctor likes you, so that means there's something there. So it's just a long, interesting journey getting into, very much like any sales, right? It's all relationships. End of the day, right? End of the day,
And trust, I believe. Yeah.
in healthcare, it's trust. Yeah, trust.
Yes.
So
Great.
then you move from there to other departments at a time, right? Land and then expand.
Right. Right. Great. So, Siva, elaborate a bit more on, let's say, the channels, because again, I can think of that. Let's say, you found this influencer, they reached out to you through a paper, for example, you mentioned, and
Mhm.
they came across you in a conference. So, what have been these different channels that you've seen, working for you, kind of like, if I may use the word, landmines that you can put so that, your target audience discovers you. So what has been those channels?
Right, right. So when it comes to clinical solutions like ours, data publications are critical, right? Nobody's just going to try something because you
Yeah.
will develop an app, right? There are 800,000 apps on App Store for health, right? For
Right.
patients, just for health. And doctors, as I said, they value clinical more than anything, right? So you need to build, if you're building something clinical, you need to publish, you need to write about it, peer reviewed in journals and things like that, right? FDA approval in our case was critical, because we are a clinical solution. But if you're building something in health IT, then you can target low hanging fruits. I'm talking about low hanging fruit as a, not as a feature, but as a as a persona, right? In non-traditional places, right? Non-traditional places meaning, I don't know how much you know about clinical social workers. Clinical social workers are a role within the hospital, right?
Yeah.
And they are extremely powerful, right? And there are some hospital CEOs now are clinical social workers in the past, right?
Mhm.
The name doesn't justify what they do internally. They're critical people. So let's say you are from a low income family scheduled to do an surgery. They're the ones who are making sure this person is ready for surgery, right? And they're also mental health counselors. They can officially treat people with mental health conditions, right?
Mhm.
In small role, but hugely powerful, and they touch every single person in the hospital, right? And if you go and meet someone and they could make an intro to you, somebody that you're trying to meet for many years, right? And it's a clinical role, right? So what I'm saying is you don't have to go and talk to one of the, don't try to find the top key opinion leader, right? Find others who are in the hospital. That's why my going back to my original point of find out who's working at these health systems, and then develop a relationship and find out what problems they have, right? End of the day, it's our problem. But also, I'd be very caution about going to large health systems. So, if you're a startup, right? Um, there have been, we have been successful. Mayo is one of the largest health systems, but there have been other horror stories too, right? Where
Mhm.
startups spend so much of time thinking they will get a deal out of a large health system, and they spend a ton of time, and either the guy leaves the hospital, the one who is working with, and otherwise you become a pet project, and it's dab in this. Some companies have gone belly up trying to focus on large health systems. So there are smaller health systems have
Right.
problems. The problem is the budget with the smaller health systems, right? US more almost all large, every hospital is losing money. It's a very thin margin business, right? In the US, not like other countries.
Right.
They're running on thin 2%, 1.5% margin business. So they will always ask you, they don't like capital purchase anymore. So even as a software as a service, right? We need to tie this into some revenue or some reduction in cost, right? And then they'll be able to buy. Good examples are, um, you know, Skype business is pretty straightforward because you're reducing doctor's time, right? And that's a straightforward thing, right? And there are other companies like Innovator and others who do, you know, things that mapped in volume. So they get paid for the by the volume, not by license number of users, right? But end of the day, they're doing something to reduce the cost, or
Mhm.
I don't know. I was in a conference recently. Someone said they're all talking about doctors' efficiency, right? Doctors are the most hardworking people, right? They're so already efficient. You're not trying to make them efficient anymore, right? The problem is in the system, not the physicians,
Right.
right? They walk in and say, we're going to improve the efficiency of this provider. They just walk out. They're angry already, right? What do you mean? I'm already working at the capacity and efficiency, right? At my, I'm going to make this, the other systems is where the problem is, right? So,
Well
how
said.
you present yourself also matters, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And
Right.
they take it because you see all the LinkedIn posts. If we're going to make the doctors efficient, and are they inefficient? They are efficient. The systems
Yeah.
are broken, right?
That would be like the biggest pet peeve for the doctor, someone educating them that, hey, I can make you efficient. Right.
Yeah, they hate
So,
that term, right? Because you
yeah.
see every AI post on LinkedIn is all about making providers efficient. I mean, they just hate that fact. You just walk with one physician from morning till end, you will
Mhm.
know what
Yeah.
they go through, and the problems are outside of their control,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Outside of the control.
Yes.
So you're not making them efficient. You make the systems efficient so they can do their job. No.
Yes. Oh, mental note, not to use
Yeah.
that. Great. So one thing, Siva, you mentioned about is again, of course, these are long sales cycle and there are these multiple stakeholders involved. So what has been your strategy, like while navigating through these troubled sales cycle, like how to keep the buyers engaged, or especially, let's say, if the momentum stalls, what have been ways that you've used to, let's say, bring that back to track or keep moving forward and so on, or maybe knowing when to s- let's say stop pursuing or something. What has been your strategies around that?
Right. So I'll start with the first one, the last question that you had, right? A budget is important because many hospitals don't have the budget, right? So
Mm,
it's a very important question you should ask the early on, right? Are you really going to waste your time, or is it something? Because everything will look strategic, right?
mm,
Everything will look strategic, will look good in the paper. So you need to check
mhm,
whether you will really get paid, when, soon, right? That's an you start from that is an important question because many hospitals in the US are
mhm,
struggling. I'm talking about 90% of the hospitals are struggling, right? Health systems. Many of them are,
right.
you will hear that in the next maybe 18 months, how many bankruptcies are going to happen in the rural health systems because of what's happening in Medicaid, right? So these
Mm,
there are 5,000 rural hospitals in the US,
mm,
right? Many of them are going to close. And I already spoke to somebody last week. He's closing his hospital, right? And they
oh,
want to roll out JOGO. And I already knew that's going to come because of what's happening. So the budget is important. That's my point, right? The budget is important. So find out whether they have the money. They may not have the money, but at least they could get you into paying when you try to show outcomes, right? Then early on, map out. Um, I think you asked two questions, but I'll answer the second one first.
mhm,
Map out the decision makers early on, right? Because I can't name the client, but I had a problem. Good example where it's the clinicians are all sold, right? Everybody wanted it. Corporate has agreed, right, to roll this out. It's a pretty large system, but there's this couple of guys in IT, right, who are like trying to figure out what's going on here, and it's going on and on and on and on and on, right? So you have to have a red flag right there, right? Hey, this is going to be a problem, and how
mhm,
much time I want to waste here. But then not giving up. Also, sometimes you'll say, okay, I'm just going to give up, right? But
mhm,
engage the others who were originally supporting you, right? they can put the pressure on those persons inside to move,
Mhm.
right? And it's day to day. I'm dealing with that right now. The clinician just been very upset. This has not been rolled out. So think about that, right? It's the other way around. He's like angry that his patients are waiting for this, right? But these IT guys are taking time to figure out what's going on, not understanding. So in
Mhm.
those cases, those that's what you'll normally end up with, right? In a scenario. So now you use your internal uh, modes to push these folks. And also, you should understand healthcare systems are very, it's not like companies, right? They operate in a different HR system, right? When I say HR system, it's not a top down approach where someone can go and knock on the door and say, get it done, right? It's a
Yeah.
very democratic
Mm. There's always
decision
a committee.
making.
Yeah. There also
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's so you should be careful about that too. It's not like someone can yell at somebody to get things done, right? It doesn't happen in health systems. Whereas in a pharma, it could happen. In pharma, I
Mhm.
can go to the CEO and say, "Hey, you know what's going on?" And they'll they'll call somebody, and then they'll happen tomorrow.
Right.
Same with payer too. So the payer and pharma are two different ones where it's a very interesting B2B sales, right? It's
Mhm.
a large deal. But when it comes to health systems, these committees get in the way, right? So and you asked one more question. I think I don't know whether they answered that
Yeah, let's
about.
so if a deal gets stalled, basically, like what are some of the things that you have done to, put them on track, or let's say, keep the different stakeholders engaged and so on.
Right, and then again, the always your champion is the most important one, right? Have the champion become the person inside, the voice for
What if,
you.
let's say the your champion switches job in between the deal? Have you come across such a situation
Yeah, yeah,
that
it
you have
happens
just
all the time, right? They leave, they go to another. If you have clinician champion, they always move, right? Doctors
Mhm.
move. I think it's like 3 years or something is the maximum they stay at a hospital or
Is
something like
that
that.
is that like a big setback, or you would always?
It would be, but then your champion should alert you. Hey, in 6 months I'm going to leave. Let me put you in touch with the next person, so you build a relationship. But
Mhm.
mostly, the in-person meetings are more valuable, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Um, Folks, if you can try to meet them in person, just do a dinner or
Right.
something. With
Right.
non-physicians, you could actually take them out for dinner. And the physicians are the ones who are bound by rules and other things. The others are okay.
Mhm.
Non-providers. So
Mhm.
meet them in just a coffee, randomly walk in and say, hey, can we have? And they also want to get out because they're stressed. It helps a
Right.
lot. It helps a lot. Yeah,
Right.
meeting them in
So
person.
relationships, of course, like people to people relationship, the human touch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. That helps. Yeah.
great. So, like we are moving towards the end of this podcast. What I would
Right.
like to ask you very specific is, your favorite story of a particular deal you are very proud of and what made it succeed. Why it's your favorite.
Yeah, yeah. You want a pharma? My favorite is a pharma deal that we
Go
closed,
ahead.
but
Yeah. No, go ahead with the pharma. That's fine.
a pharma deal that I closed the last time. But I think I'll give you something that's more relevant to you guys because mostly health systems, right? Health systems would be good.
We can hear
Uh,
two also. So that should be fine.
so the pharma one was this was when we started the company, right? We had a software which was detecting side effects. And we had a beautiful website, but we were a startup. A couple of people, just me and a bunch of guys. And I got a call randomly from random number, and I was the call center because it's coming to my phone, right, as a
Yes, yes.
startup. So I pick up the phone, and they didn't say who that is. We are calling from a large company. We want to talk to you. We want to send you an NDA before we reveal what it is. Then I was like, fine. I pretended I'm a call center person, and I said, well, I'll get back to you with my management, which I was the management. And we got so then they sent an NDA. Then I found out it was one of the largest pharma companies in the world wanted to talk to us because we had content about what we did, right? When they had a
Mhm.
problem, because people Google a lot. They do. I mean, now they chat GPT a lot, right? So they may be looking for problems when you come up. And what is this company? Now let me talk. That's the best thing that would
Ah,
happen to you. So content
correct.
marketing is critical for
Right.
you and identify the problem. So that we got. So this was a pretty large deal, right? Happened within 14 days, right? We closed because they had a pressing problem they had to close, right?
Mm,
So my point here was we were right there when they had a problem, right? And it closed the pharma, right?
mm,
The second interesting thing I would say, a patient went. This is Jago case, right? A patient went and asked a hospital, "How come you don't have Jago inside your hospital?" Right?
mhm.
How come you don't have it, right?
Okay,
That
nice.
end of the day, hospitals, their customers are patients, right? If a patient comes and challenges you, customer tells you you don't have something that
Yeah.
uh, that just moves pretty quickly up the chain, right? Hey, this patient is asking, and then hopefully that patient is even a well-known patient, right? So that's something that happened to us recently, where a patient went and asked a health system, "How come
Mhm.
you don't offer this?" And we got a call immediately from the hospital,
Nice.
and we health system then right there, right? So these are some good examples, but both you
Oh,
can see the both the cases, right? Um, it was an inbound
yes, yes. It was about getting discovered, basically. Like
discovered, and when they have a
discovered.
problem, when you get discovered, right?
Yeah.
So nothing like that. You're not
Mhm.
chasing a deal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You
And
they
then
they're
those
coming
deals would move fast, basically, because the
much
trust,
faster, much faster.
credibility is all already established.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because they already have a problem, they want to solve it, right?
Mhm.
Which is a
Now
very
I have,
critical thing.
yeah. So now I have a contrasting question, which is like an example of a painful lost deal that taught you an important lesson about selling. That you were like, now I learned not do it this way or something.
I lost it, and it's painful. That's what they're saying. Yeah, a
Yeah,
painful.
yeah. So yeah, but
Yeah, I'll tell
important
you. I mean,
lesson.
this. Yeah. Um. So I have again two stories for that. I'll tell you the first,
Yeah,
the
sure.
pharma story, right? We were a startup at that time. We were doing, we were doing closing deals, and this massive pharma company, right,
Mm,
wanted to do an AI. This I'm talking about 2012, 2013. After the AI was just was just the beginning of it, right? We were early on, um, and they say, okay, we do a pilot
mm,
with another large tech company. Now I can name it. It was IBM, and they had a bake off, right? So our
mhm.
product and IBM's Watson. That was IBM's Watson AI product,
Yeah,
IBM's Watson
okay,
product, and we beat that, right? The outcome is we had our software beat them. They still ended up going with IBM because it was a lot, for the trust of the company, and then the CTO eventually got fired and everything, right? The guy who chose IBM because that didn't work for them. IBM Watson is gone now. So that was painful for me, how the perception of a CTO to work with a large company, you can lose a deal although you are the best product, right? In that, so that was a painful one. Recently, we also sell to employers. So Jago is used by employers too. So migraine products and other things. It was a very similar thing, and there are a few other players who are. We don't compete with them in what we do, but especially in the musculoskeletal pain, they have a bigger presence, and they ended up choosing them. And interestingly, we start treating their patients who are their employees outside of the
mhm,
employer system because they come through to other doctors. Hey, that
mhm,
solution doesn't work for me. I want Jago, but still
mhm.
you end up that company didn't buy, the patients are getting it from other sources, right? Which is like painful. Your companies are supposed to get our solution, but they didn't. Now you're coming. uh, so these are sometimes lost due to perception from the inside. I want to work with a
Mhm.
large company, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
So
think that's the
certain
biggest
things we are big, like
challenge.
Jago right now, we are big in certain conditions, but in musculoskeletal, there are two, three big players that are doing somewhat similar to what we do. So it is normally you see that in B2B sales, the guy doesn't want to lose his job. He can always say, I bought the solution because Microsoft has
Yeah,
it,
the
right?
top three, five vendors. Yeah,
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 there's a name
nice.
for that too in selling, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Status
so,
quo,
so
as you say. Status quo is the biggest
yeah, yeah,
challenge.
yeah, yeah. So he doesn't lose his job for hiring someone for getting a product. So these are some painful ones that you will normally do. So carve out a niche for you, right? And and then play in that. It will be good. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Right. So let's talk about the future. So the future of selling in healthcare. Like how are trends like AI, ambient scribing, interoperability, changing the sales conversations with hospitals? Are you seeing like in your career, like there's a difference now versus, let's say, how sales was, let's say, 5, 10 years back? Do you see any apparent changes there, or you feel it's pretty much the
Absolutely,
same?
absolutely. I see more and more now within health systems, the clinicians becoming very influential in buying, right? A
Yeah.
recent example could be Open Evidence, right? The
Mm,
AI company Open Evidence, right? So it's a chat GPT for doctors.
yeah.
Everybody wanted to build ChatGPT for doctors. This company did a fantastic job, I think, and they give it for free for doctors. They started out in the consumer world, then they went and talked to the health system CTOs. Hey, and I want this, right? Inside.
Right. Yeah.
So that drove adoption. So you can see that sales is a little different now, right? So the physicians are finding out about tech outside and asking the so the so I don't know what if there's a name for that, but traditionally how this would have worked, right? Traditionally, you would have gone and talked to a CTO, and then they involve the physician, and they come and give feedback. Here,
Right.
they find out about something outside the health system, and then they influence the sales. That's happening a lot, right? That's happening a lot in many health system sales.
Hmm.
Um, Even appointment reminders, right? They find out about some interesting company has done something, they saw something, right, in their own, and they go and tell, I want this. So physicians are becoming more and more
Hmm.
influential, and they're finding out stuff from outside, right?
Nice. Nice. Nice.
um, and physicians are internationally connected, right? So even if you do something in India, the places, they could come
Hmm.
and tell here, hey, I saw this product and it's great, you should have. And that's a different sales model that's
Mm.
changing. Whereas traditionally you would be an IT sales,
Mm.
now it's coming from the consumer world, or the users finding out and telling health systems, say, I know I want this. So that's changing in the AI world, because many things that are only corporate are available outside of corporate, right?
Mm.
Right.
Right. Right.
It started
No,
out as a B2C.
that, that
Yeah.
that I think is a fantastic trend for any startup, because I think
Mhm.
that means that you have the power to, if you have a fantastic product and a physician or a clinician discovers you, you have a greater chance than ever to make it.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. That's good for startups, right? When Open Evidence was a company, was only an 18 months old company, like now few more billions because of what happened, how they're able to, and there are other companies too where folks find out. So, I mean,
Mhm.
that could be an interesting way to sell. Find out who the persona that you're selling to, and maybe you're able to capture them outside of the corporate world in some
Yeah.
kind of an app, and they may be able to take it in, right? Give a
Yes.
free version of it for do something outside, right? So, Open
Right.
Evidence was free for doctors outside, but health systems pay for it, right?
Mhm. Okay. Very
Freemium model.
interesting. Yeah. Last question. What advice would you give to health tech founders? Like, we covered a lot of things, but let's say if someone is starting out today, what would be your one biggest piece of advice that, make sure you do this one at least?
I think that goes back to the last question and the last point we talked about, Avish. If you're trying to sell into health systems now in extremely crowded Me Too world, right? It's going to be difficult unless you have traction to show. You won't be able to see traction as a startup
Mhm.
in traditional logos, right? You will never be able to beat that other guys who have the logos. So doing something like what Open Evidence did, right?
Mm.
And as a startup, you have limited resources. So do something that people use it, then that becomes easier for you to sell because you already have folks using it outside, right? I mean, some
Mm.
solutions are harder to even do that because some of them doesn't make sense to build a consumer facing app, right?
Mm.
But if you could find a way to do that, like even in my last startup, right, we had a version where people can go find out side effects of drugs through a website,
Mhm.
right? So
Right.
that are unknown to people, right? Something like folks
Right.
use.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's an evolving field. How
Hmm.
this health tech is a hard one to, right? It's not easy, right?
Right.
So my advice would be find users, right? Find users, even if it's free users, find users, and then the product get refined, and also they could be your champions inside corporate world, because going directly into a B2B health IT sale is not easy. Yeah. Not easy.
Right. Thank you so much, Siva. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Siva Nadarajah, and he's the co-founder and president of JOGO Health, a digital neurology company helping employers and payers provide comprehensive solutions for their members with neurological, chronic pain, neuromuscular, neuropelviology, and neurogastroenterology conditions. Thank you, Siva, for sharing these great insights, and I believe this would be very useful inputs for fellow co-founders who are breaking the code for selling into healthcare. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
today.
you, Aish. Thank you.